What if one of the biggest reasons people struggle in relationships is that they are trying too hard to prove themselves right? Imagine you're having an argument with someone. You know you're right. You have the facts, you have the evidence, you can explain exactly where the other person is wrong. So you push harder. You explain again. They become defensive. You explain even more. And somehow, the conversation gets worse. Why? Because human beings don't respond to facts alone. We respond to how we feel. Dale Carnegie understood this deeply. His book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, isn't really about winning people in the way the title might suggest. It is about understanding human nature. People want to feel important. They want to feel respected. They want to be heard. They want their dignity protected. And when you understand these needs, you can communicate more effectively without forcing people to agree with you. The surprising lesson is simple. If you want to influence people, start by... Think about the last time someone criticized you. Even if the criticism was correct, how did it feel? Perhaps your first reaction wasn't curiosity. It was defense. You wanted to explain yourself. Maybe you thought, they don't understand, or they're being unfair. This reaction is incredibly human. Nobody enjoys feeling attacked. And this is why Carnegie begins with a powerful principle. Avoid unnecessary criticism, condemnation, and complaint. That doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means understanding what criticism often produces. When people feel attacked, they defend themselves. They protect their pride. They search for reasons why they're right. And once someone becomes defensive, your message becomes much harder to hear. You may win the argument, but lose the relationship. You may prove your point, but create resentment. So before criticizing someone, ask yourself, what am I actually trying to accomplish? If your goal is improvement, humiliation is usually a poor strategy. If your goal is connection, attack is even worse. Sometimes the most effective way to change someone's behavior... This doesn't mean you should stay silent when something is wrong. It means you should separate the person from the problem. Instead of saying, you're careless, talk about the specific behavior. Instead of, you never listen, explain what happened. Instead of, you're impossible to work with, describe the situation that needs to change. Why does this matter? Because attacking someone's identity makes them feel that they must defend who they are. Discussing a behavior gives them something they can actually change. There is a major difference between you are a bad employee and this report has several errors. Let's figure out how we can prevent them next time. One attacks the person. The other addresses the problem. The second approach leaves room for cooperation, and cooperation is usually more useful than blame. The next time you're tempted to criticize someone, pause. Ask yourself, will this help them improve, or will it simply make me feel right? That question can change the entire conversation. Carnegie also points out something uncomfortable about human behavior. People rarely see themselves as the villain in their own story. Even when someone behaves badly, they usually have an explanation. They believe they had a reason. They may think they were protecting themselves, helping someone, correcting an injustice, doing what they believed was necessary. From their perspective, their behavior makes sense. This is why direct condemnation often fails. You're not simply challenging an action. You're challenging the story they have about themselves. And people protect that story. Think about your own mistakes. When you made a bad decision, did you immediately think, I'm a terrible person? Probably not. You probably had a reason. Maybe you didn't have enough information. Maybe you were tired. Maybe someone influenced you. Maybe you thought you were doing the right thing. Other people operate the same way. Understanding this doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means recognizing that judgment alone rarely creates change. If you want to influence someone, begin by understanding the world from their side. Now, consider another powerful human desire. The desire to feel important. Almost everyone wants to feel that they matter. They want their contribution to be noticed. They want their opinions to have value. They want to feel respected. This doesn't necessarily mean they want constant praise. Often, they simply want genuine recognition. Think about how you feel when someone remembers something you said weeks ago. They noticed. They listened. They cared enough to remember. That small moment can feel surprisingly meaningful. Now, compare it with being ignored. You speak, and nobody looks up. You contribute, and someone else takes the credit. You make an effort, and nobody notices. The emotional difference is enormous. This is why appreciation is so powerful. But Carnegie makes an important distinction. Appreciation must be sincere. Flattery is manipulation. Appreciation is recognition. People can usually sense the difference. A generic compliment may sound nice, but specific appreciation feels real. Instead of, "You're amazing," say what you actually noticed. Your patience helped the team get through that problem. Specificity communicates attention, and attention is one of the clearest forms of respect. One of the easiest ways to become more likable is to become genuinely interested in other people. That sounds simple, but think about most conversations. How often are we actually listening? Someone tells us about their work, and we immediately start thinking about our own experience. They mention a trip, and we begin preparing our story. They describe a problem, and we start thinking about the advice we want to give. The conversation may look like a dialogue, but internally, both people are waiting for their turn to speak. Carnegie suggests something different. Become interested. Ask questions. Listen. Let the other person talk about what matters to them. This isn't a trick. It's human nature. People naturally feel closer to those who take genuine interest in their lives. You don't have to pretend to care. You simply have to become curious. What does this person enjoy? What are they proud of? What are they struggling with? What matters to them? What are they trying to achieve? The more you understand someone, the easier it becomes to communicate with them. There is another simple habit that can transform conversations. Remember people's names. A person's name is deeply personal. When you remember it, you communicate something subtle. I noticed you. I remember you. You matter enough for me to remember. Forgetting someone's name isn't always disrespectful. People forget names. But making an effort to remember creates connection. Imagine meeting someone once. Months later, you see them again. They remember your name. Immediately, the interaction feels warmer. Why? Because recognition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates comfort. This is one reason personal attention is so powerful. People don't want to feel like anonymous objects moving through your day. They want to feel seen. So when you meet someone, listen carefully when they introduce themselves. Use their name naturally during the conversation. Remember something connected to them, not because you are trying to manipulate them, but because you are practicing attention. And attention is at the heart of good relationships. When you remember people, you are telling them that their presence mattered. Another principle sounds almost too simple. Smile. But Carnegie's point isn't about forcing a permanent smile onto your face. A genuine smile communicates warmth. It says, "I'm comfortable with you. I'm happy to see you. You are welcome here." Think about entering a room where everyone looks tense. Then someone looks at you and smiles. The atmosphere changes slightly. A small signal of warmth can reduce social tension. Of course, a smile cannot solve every problem, and fake friendliness can be obvious. The deeper lesson is about the emotional signals you bring into an interaction. Do you make people feel comfortable? Do they feel judged? Do they feel rushed? Do they feel like they're bothering you? Your facial expression, tone, posture, and attention all contribute. People don't experience your words separately from your emotional presence. They experience the whole interaction. So before entering an important conversation, notice your own state. If you're irritated, you may communicate irritation without realizing it. Sometimes improving a conversation begins before you say a single word.
Carnegie also emphasizes something many people underestimate: the power of listening. A good listener doesn't simply remain quiet. They make the other person feel heard. Imagine someone telling you about a difficult experience. You interrupt, you finish their sentences, you immediately give advice, you compare their problem with your own. Even if your intentions are good, the person may leave feeling unheard. Now imagine another conversation. You allow them to finish. You ask a thoughtful question. You remember a detail. You don't rush to solve the problem. The person feels different. They feel that you were actually present. This is why listening is one of the most powerful social skills. It requires humility. You temporarily make someone else's experience more important than your need to speak. And surprisingly, that often makes the other person more interested in hearing what you have to say later. People become more receptive to those who make them feel understood. If you want better conversations, don't begin by becoming more interesting. Begin by becoming more interested. One of Carnegie's most practical ideas is simple: encourage other people to talk about themselves. For many people, this feels surprisingly difficult. We want to impress. We want to demonstrate knowledge. We want to tell our stories. We want people to see what we can do. But the person across from us has the same desire. They also want to be heard. So instead of competing for attention, give it. Ask about their work, their interests, their experiences, their goals, their challenges. Then listen to the answer. You may discover something unexpected. When people talk about something meaningful to them, they often become more open. And once they feel comfortable, the conversation becomes deeper. This doesn't mean you should turn every interaction into an interview. Good conversations still require sharing. But there is a difference between participating and dominating. If you consistently leave conversations knowing more about yourself than the other person, you may be talking too much. Try leaving a conversation knowing something meaningful about them. That small shift can dramatically improve your relationships.
Another powerful idea is to talk in terms of the other person's interests. This sounds obvious, but most people naturally talk about what matters to themselves. A salesperson talks about features. A manager talks about targets. A parent talks about rules. A friend talks about their own experience. But influence becomes easier when you understand what the other person values. Imagine trying to convince someone to join a project. You could explain why the project is important to you. Or you could explain how participating might help them develop a skill they care about. The facts haven't necessarily changed. The frame has. The second explanation connects with their interests. This isn't manipulation when the benefit is genuine. It's communication. People pay attention to what matters to them. So before trying to persuade someone, ask yourself, what does this person care about? What problem are they trying to solve? What outcome matters to them? Then communicate from that starting point. You are not abandoning your own goal. You're making the conversation relevant to theirs. And relevance is one of the strongest forms of attention.
Now we reach one of Carnegie's most important lessons about disagreement. Avoid unnecessary arguments. That can sound strange. If you believe you're right, why not prove it? Because winning an argument doesn't necessarily mean winning influence. You can defeat someone's logic and still lose their cooperation. You can prove them wrong and make them dislike you. You can leave the conversation feeling victorious, while the relationship becomes weaker. Human beings don't like losing face. When someone is publicly embarrassed, they may become more determined to resist you. Their goal changes. It is no longer find the truth. It becomes defend myself. And once that happens, logic has less influence. This doesn't mean you should agree with false information.
it means you should choose carefully when and how you challenge someone. Ask yourself, is this disagreement important? Will proving this point improve anything? Can I communicate it without humiliating them? Sometimes the smartest argument is the one you don't need to have.
If you disagree with someone, begin with respect. You might say, I may be looking at this differently. Or, that's an interesting point. Can we look at another possibility? Notice the difference. You're not declaring you're wrong. You're opening a door. That gives the other person room to think without immediately defending themselves. And when someone feels respected, they are more likely to listen. This is particularly important in leadership. If employees believe that disagreeing with you will embarrass them, they will eventually stop telling you what they really think. You may believe everyone agrees with you, but actually, everyone may simply be afraid to disagree. That is dangerous. A leader needs honest information, and honest information requires psychological safety. So if you want people to speak openly, don't punish disagreement. Invite it. Ask, what am I missing? What risks do you see? What would you do differently? Those questions don't weaken authority. They strengthen decision-making.
Another Carnegie principle is to admit your mistakes quickly and sincerely. This can feel uncomfortable. We often want to protect our image. We think admitting an error will make us look weak. But something surprising happens when you acknowledge a mistake before someone else has to expose it. Defensiveness disappears. The other person no longer needs to prove that you were wrong. You have already admitted it. Imagine saying, I made a mistake here. That's it. No long explanation, no excuse, no attempt to shift blame. Just ownership. People often respond positively because honesty reduces tension. It also builds credibility. Nobody expects perfection, but people do notice whether you take responsibility. A person who never admits mistakes becomes difficult to trust because everyone knows mistakes happen. The question isn't, do you make mistakes? The question is, what do you do when you make one? Owning your mistakes doesn't reduce your authority. In many situations, it makes people trust you more.
Carnegie also teaches the importance of beginning conversations in a friendly way. That doesn't mean being artificially cheerful. It means remembering that emotional tone matters. Imagine receiving 2 requests. One begins with, you never finish this on time. The other begins with, can we look at what is delaying this process? The second conversation creates less resistance. The problem is still being addressed, but the opening doesn't immediately attack the person. This is especially important when asking someone to change. People are more receptive when they don't feel threatened. A friendly beginning creates psychological space. Then you can discuss the difficult issue. This is why communication is often less about the words themselves and more about the emotional environment surrounding them. If someone feels respected, they can hear difficult information. If they feel attacked, even useful information may be rejected. So before an important conversation, don't only prepare what you're going to say, prepare the emotional tone in which you're going to say it.
Another fascinating principle is allowing the other person to feel that an idea is theirs. Why? Because people naturally support what they feel they helped create. Imagine your manager tells you exactly what to do. You may complete the task. But imagine the manager asks, what do you think we should do? Now you think, you contribute, you become part of the solution. The final decision may even be similar to what the manager originally wanted, but psychologically, it feels different. You had a role in creating it. This can be powerful in teams, families, and relationships. Instead of always giving instructions, ask questions. What would you suggest? What do you think would work? What options do you see? People don't need to be controlled to cooperate. Often, they need to feel respected enough to participate. Influence becomes stronger when people have ownership, and ownership creates commitment. The goal isn't to trick someone into thinking an idea was theirs. It's to genuinely give them space to contribute. People support what they help build.
Another principle is seeing things from the other person's point of view. This may be one of the hardest skills because our own perspective feels obvious. We know our intentions. We know what we meant. We know what we experienced. But other people don't have access to our internal world. They only see our behavior. Imagine sending a short message because you're busy. You think nothing of it. The other person reads it and feels that you're angry. You think, why would they interpret it that way? Because they don't have the context you have. This happens constantly. People react to information differently because they have different histories, different fears, different expectations, different experiences. So when someone responds unexpectedly, instead of immediately deciding they're unreasonable, ask, what does this situation look like from their side? You may still disagree, but understanding their perspective gives you a better chance of responding effectively. Empathy doesn't require agreement. It requires perspective.
Imagine trying to motivate someone. You tell them what you want, but they don't respond. You think they're lazy. What if they're actually uncertain? What if they don't understand the goal? What if they fear failure? What if they don't believe their effort will be recognized? What if the reward you think matters doesn't matter to them? Motivation is personal. People are driven by different things. Some value recognition. Some value autonomy. Some value security. Some value growth. Some value money. Some value meaning. If you want to influence someone, understand what motivates them. Again, this isn't manipulation. It's understanding. A good leader doesn't simply ask, how do I get people to work harder? They ask, what helps this person perform at their best? That question produces a completely different style of leadership. And often, people don't need more pressure. They need clarity, trust, recognition, resources, or a reason to care.
Another powerful principle is giving people a reputation to live up to. When you see someone at their best, tell them. Not with empty praise, with genuine recognition. You are very patient with difficult customers. You have a talent for explaining complicated things. You handle pressure better than most people. When someone hears a sincere description of a strength, they may become more conscious of it. And once a strength becomes part of their identity, they may try to behave consistently with it. This can be especially powerful with children. Instead of constantly focusing on what they did wrong, notice the behavior you want to strengthen. You were very responsible when you remembered that. You showed real kindness there. You stayed patient even though you were frustrated. You're not pretending, you're helping them notice a capability. Adults need this too. People often grow toward the expectations that respected people hold for them. When someone believes you see potential in them, they may begin seeing it in themselves.
But there is a difference between encouragement and manipulation. If you praise someone for something they clearly haven't done, they may sense that you're being dishonest. Genuine recognition is grounded in reality. Look for something real, then name it. This is why specific appreciation is powerful. Instead of saying, you're a great leader, say, you stayed calm when everyone else was panicking. Instead of, you're very helpful, say, you noticed that I was struggling and offered help without being asked. Specificity makes appreciation believable, and believable appreciation can strengthen behavior. People repeat what they see as part of their identity. If someone begins to think, I'm the kind of person who follows through, they are more likely to follow through. If they think, I'm someone who handles difficult situations calmly, they may work harder to maintain that identity. Words can shape self-perception. Use them carefully.
One of Carnegie's recurring themes is respect. Not superficial politeness. Real respect. Respect means remembering that other people have their own goals, their own fears, their own experiences, and their own reasons. You don't have to agree with them to respect them. You don't have to like everyone. You don't have to tolerate harmful behavior, but you can still treat people with dignity. This becomes especially important when you have power. A manager can embarrass an employee. A parent can humiliate a child.
A partner can use someone's vulnerability against them. A leader can silence disagreement. Power makes respect more important, not less. Because when people depend on you, your words carry more weight. The stronger your position, the more carefully you should use it. Influence is most valuable when people cooperate freely, not when they are afraid of what happens if they don't.
And perhaps this is why Carnegie's ideas remain relevant. Technology has changed. Workplaces have changed. Communication has changed. But human needs remain remarkably familiar. People still want recognition. They still want respect. They still want to feel important. They still want to be understood. They still dislike humiliation. They still resist being forced. They still respond to genuine interest. They still appreciate someone who listens. The tools may be different, but the psychology is familiar. A message on a phone can create the same emotional reaction as a conversation across a table. A public comment can embarrass someone just as effectively as a public criticism. A thoughtful message can make someone feel valued. The medium changes. The human being doesn't. That is why understanding people remains one of the most useful skills you can develop.
So, what does it actually mean to win friends? It doesn't mean collecting people. It doesn't mean making everyone like you. It doesn't mean becoming charming all the time. It means creating relationships where people feel respected, heard, and valued. Friendship grows through attention, through reliability, through shared experiences, through curiosity, through kindness, through forgiveness, and through genuine interest. You don't build a strong relationship by constantly asking, what can this person do for me? You build it by asking, what can I contribute to this relationship? That doesn't mean giving endlessly. Healthy relationships have reciprocity, but your starting point changes. Instead of looking for what you can gain, you begin noticing what you can give. Attention, encouragement, support, understanding. Sometimes that's enough to transform an ordinary connection into a meaningful relationship.
Now, think about influence. Many people associate influence with power, position, money, authority. But some of the most influential people have none of these. They influence because people trust them. They listen. They understand. They make others feel respected. They don't need to dominate the room. People want to hear them. That's a different kind of power. It is built slowly, and it can disappear quickly if trust is abused. This is why genuine influence isn't about controlling people. It's about creating enough trust that people are willing to consider your perspective. You cannot force genuine agreement, but you can make your ideas easier to hear. You can reduce defensiveness. You can show respect. You can listen before speaking. You can understand what matters to the other person. And when you do, influence becomes less about pressure and more about connection. Think about the people you admire. Why do you admire them? Often, it's not simply because they're successful. Maybe they remember people. Maybe they stay calm. Maybe they listen. Maybe they make others feel important. Maybe they give credit. Maybe they admit mistakes. Maybe they don't need to prove that they're better than everyone else. These qualities create trust, and trust creates influence. This is an important lesson for anyone who wants to lead. If you want people to listen to you, become someone worth listening to. If you want people to trust you, become trustworthy. If you want people to respect you, treat them with respect. Influence begins with character. Techniques can create attention, but character creates lasting relationships. And people eventually discover the difference. You can learn the perfect words, but if your intentions are selfish, people will notice. Authenticity is difficult to fake over time. Another lesson is to avoid trying to change people unnecessarily. This may be one of the hardest things in relationships. We see someone's habits and immediately imagine how much better they would be if they changed. We want them to communicate differently, work differently, think differently, react differently. But people don't usually change because someone tells them, you need to change. They change when they become ready, when they understand why, and when they believe the change is possible. Your role isn't always to fix. Sometimes it is to encourage. Sometimes it is to create an environment where change becomes easier. And sometimes you simply have to accept that another person is different from you. Acceptance doesn't mean approving everything. It means recognizing reality. You cannot build a healthy relationship with an imaginary version of someone. You have to relate to the person who actually exists. That realization can remove enormous frustration. There is another subtle lesson. Don't make people feel foolish. Even when someone makes an obvious mistake, humiliation rarely helps. Imagine making a mistake in front of a group. Then someone laughs and says, "How could you not know that?" You may never forget the embarrassment. Now imagine someone quietly says, "Don't worry, this is easy to miss. Let's fix it." Same mistake, completely different emotional experience. The second person protects your dignity, and you are more likely to learn from the mistake. This matters because everyone makes mistakes. If people fear humiliation, they hide errors. If they feel safe admitting mistakes, problems can be corrected earlier. So if you want to help people improve, make it safe for them to learn. Correct without humiliating. Challenge without insulting. Teach without making someone feel stupid. The goal is improvement, not punishment. And what about criticism? Sometimes criticism is necessary. A business needs standards. A relationship needs boundaries. A team needs accountability. The answer isn't avoiding difficult conversations. It's making them constructive. Start with the shared goal. We both want this project to succeed. Then describe the issue. This part isn't working as expected. Then invite collaboration. What do you think we should change? This creates a different emotional environment. You're no longer standing on opposite sides. You're standing on the same side, looking at the problem together. That shift is powerful. Instead of "you caused this problem," you communicate, "let's solve this problem." The person becomes a partner in the solution. And when people feel like partners, they are more likely to cooperate. This is one of the simplest principles of effective influence. Don't make the person the enemy. Make the problem the enemy. Another powerful habit is giving honest appreciation before you need something. Not as a tactic, but as a way of noticing people. If you only praise someone when you want a favor, they may eventually recognize the pattern. Real appreciation exists even when you need nothing. Notice effort. Notice improvement. Notice reliability. Notice kindness. And say it. People often assume others know they're appreciated. They may not. Silence can make effort invisible. A simple "thank you, I noticed what you did," can mean more than you realize, especially when someone has been working hard without recognition. We often underestimate how little genuine appreciation people receive. And because appreciation is rare, sincere appreciation can become memorable. But remember, don't manufacture it. Look for something real. Then acknowledge it. The goal isn't to make someone feel important artificially. It's to recognize the importance they already have. Now, imagine applying these principles at work. You enter a meeting. Instead of immediately presenting your own ideas, you ask the team what they think. You listen. You recognize good contributions. You disagree respectfully. You admit when you don't know. You give credit. You avoid embarrassing people. Over time, something happens. People become more comfortable around you. They speak more openly. They bring problems earlier. They become more willing to cooperate. Your influence grows, not because you demanded authority, but because you created trust. This is what makes Carnegie's philosophy powerful. It doesn't require you to become someone you're not. It asks you to become more aware of the people around you. And when awareness increases, your communication improves. When communication improves, relationships improve. And when relationships improve, influence often follows naturally.
The same principles work at home. Imagine a partner makes a mistake. You could attack, or you could begin with understanding. Imagine a child does something wrong. You could shame them, or you could help them understand the consequence. Imagine a parent disagrees with you. You could dismiss them, or you could listen to the experience behind their opinion. Families are often where our social skills are tested most intensely because we are comfortable enough to show our worst reactions. We become impatient. We interrupt. We assume. We criticize. We expect people to understand us without explaining ourselves. And yet, the people closest to us often deserve our best communication, not our leftovers. Social intelligence begins at home. The way you speak to the people closest to you reveals how deeply you understand these principles. Because kindness is easy when you are trying to impress someone. Real character appears when you don't have to impress them.
There is also a lesson about gratitude. We often notice what people do wrong and overlook what they do right. A colleague makes one mistake, and we remember it. They do 50 things correctly, and we consider that normal. A partner forgets one thing, and we focus on it. They may have done hundreds of thoughtful things, but those disappear into the background. The human mind naturally notices problems, so appreciation sometimes requires deliberate attention. Ask yourself, what is this person doing right? What do I appreciate that I haven't said? Who deserves recognition? Then tell them. Don't wait for a special occasion. A sincere expression of gratitude can change the emotional climate of a relationship. And it changes you, too. When you regularly look for what is good in people, you begin seeing more of it. Your relationships don't necessarily become perfect. Your attention simply becomes more balanced. You stop measuring people only by their mistakes.
One of Carnegie's deepest lessons is that people want to feel important. But there is a healthier way to understand this. People want their existence to matter. They want their effort to mean something. They want to know that someone notices. This is why a manager saying, "I trust your judgment," can be powerful. A parent saying, "I'm proud of how you handled that," can be powerful. A friend saying, "I'm glad you told me," can be powerful. None of these statements requires manipulation. They simply communicate value. And when people feel valued, they often become more willing to contribute. This is why recognition can be such a powerful leadership tool. People don't only work for money. They also work for meaning, respect, growth, belonging, recognition. A person who feels invisible may eventually stop contributing. A person who feels seen may give much more than expected.
But there is a trap. If you spend your entire life trying to make everyone like you, you may lose yourself. Carnegie's principles are not a command to become a people pleaser. You still need boundaries. You still need standards. You still need the ability to say no. You can be kind without agreeing. You can listen without obeying. You can understand without accepting. You can respect someone without allowing them to disrespect you. This distinction is essential. Winning friends isn't about becoming agreeable to everything. It is about becoming someone people can communicate with. Influence doesn't mean surrendering your judgment. It means making your judgment easier for others to hear, while remaining open to theirs. Healthy relationships contain boundaries. Without boundaries, kindness becomes exhaustion. Without honesty, friendship becomes performance. Without self-respect, connection becomes dependence. Real connection requires both generosity and
how to win friends and influence people isn't really about winning people. People aren't prizes. They aren't targets. They aren't problems to solve. They are human beings with their own needs, their own histories, their own insecurities, and their own dreams. The deeper lesson is, if you want better relationships, become better at understanding people. If you want influence, become worthy of trust. If you want respect, give respect. If you want people to listen, listen first. If you want appreciation, learn to appreciate. If you want cooperation, create partnership. If you want connection, show genuine interest. These principles sound simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. They require practice, especially when you're tired, angry, busy, or convinced you're right. That's when the principles matter most.
Because anyone can be kind when everything is going well. The real test comes during disagreement, when someone disappoints you, when someone misunderstands you, when someone makes a mistake, when you feel criticized. Can you pause? Can you choose your words? Can you stay curious? Can you protect the relationship without abandoning your position? That is where social intelligence becomes real. Not in theory, in the moment. You feel the anger, but don't immediately attack. You feel the urge to prove yourself, but choose to listen. You feel disappointed, but explain instead of accusing. You recognize a mistake and apologize. These small choices create your reputation. Not one dramatic gesture, but repeated behavior. People learn who you are by watching what you do consistently. And eventually, your reputation becomes part of your influence. Think about the person you would most like to have in your life. Someone you trust. Someone who listens. Someone who doesn't constantly judge. Someone who makes you feel comfortable being yourself. Someone who can disagree without becoming cruel. Someone who remembers what matters to you. Someone who gives honest feedback without humiliating you. Now, ask yourself, am I becoming that person? It's easy to focus on what we want from relationships, but powerful change begins when we ask what we bring into them. Do people feel heard around you? Do they feel respected? Do they feel safe telling you the truth? Do they feel that you notice their effort? Do they feel that disagreement is allowed? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they are useful. Because relationships aren't built only by finding good people. They're also built by becoming a good person to be around.
And perhaps this is the most practical lesson of all. Start small. The next time someone speaks, don't interrupt. The next time someone helps you, thank them specifically. The next time someone makes a mistake, correct the behavior without attacking the person. The next time you disagree, ask a question before making a judgment. The next time someone tells you something important, remember it. The next time you feel the need to prove you're right, pause. The next time you meet someone, learn their name. These actions are tiny, but relationships are built from tiny actions. A single conversation rarely transforms a relationship. Repeated behavior does. Every interaction becomes a vote for the kind of person you are. And eventually, people respond to the pattern. They trust you.
There is a final idea worth remembering. Influence without empathy can become manipulation. But influence combined with understanding can become leadership. The difference is intention. Are you trying to control someone or help them? Are you trying to win or understand? Are you trying to get your way or find a solution that works for both sides? These questions reveal the quality of your influence. You can persuade without deceiving. You can negotiate without humiliating. You can lead without dominating. You can disagree without disrespect.
And you can become successful without making other people feel small. In fact, the people who create the strongest long-term influence often do the opposite. They make other people feel bigger, more capable, more respected, more confident, more willing to contribute. That may be one of the greatest forms of influence, helping people become better versions of themselves.
So when you think about winning friends, don't think about techniques first. Think about attention. When you think about influence, don't think about control. Think about trust. When you think about communication, don't think only about speaking. Think about listening. When you think about leadership, don't think only about authority. Think about responsibility. And when you think about relationships, don't ask only, what am I getting? Ask, what am I giving? These questions shift everything, because people remember how you make them feel. They remember whether you listened, whether you respected them, whether you gave them dignity, whether you noticed their effort, whether they could disagree with you safely. And those memories shape whether they want you in their lives. That is why the simplest social skills can have the greatest consequences.
Maybe the real secret to winning friends is not trying so hard to win them. Stop performing. Start listening. Stop trying to impress. Start becoming interested. Stop trying to prove you're right. Start trying to understand. Stop looking for people's weaknesses. Start noticing their strengths. Stop demanding recognition. Start giving it. Stop treating disagreement as a battle. Start treating it as an opportunity to learn. These changes may seem small, but they transform the emotional experience people have around you. And that experience becomes your influence. You don't have to be the loudest person, the smartest person, the funniest person, or the most successful person. You simply need to become someone who makes people feel respected, heard, and valued. That is a form of influence that lasts far longer.
In the end, how to win friends and influence people is less about winning and more about understanding. Understanding that people want to matter. Understanding that criticism can create resistance. Understanding that genuine appreciation builds connection. Understanding that listening can be more powerful than speaking. Understanding that people are more receptive when they feel respected. Understanding that influence works best when it doesn't feel like control. And perhaps the biggest lesson, the way you treat people becomes part of the life you create. If you make people feel small, you may gain temporary compliance. If you make people feel valued, you build trust. And trust can open doors that force never can. So the next time you enter a conversation, listen a little longer. Judge a little less. Appreciate something genuine. Ask one more question. And remember, people may forget what you said, but they will often remember how you made them feel. If you enjoyed this summary, like the video and subscribe for more powerful books on psychology, self-development, relationships, and human behavior. And remember, the best way to influence people is to first make them feel understood.